The lantern swung like a slow heart on its frayed rope, casting shadows that stretched thin and tall across the worn planks of the auction stage. The crowd had thinned as the sun sank, but those who remained leaned against fence rails and doorframes, some with arms crossed, some with coins still in their pockets, waiting to see if the last girl would be taken before night swallowed the border town. The air tasted of dust and something tired, as though the day itself wanted to close its eyes. She stood alone, the last of the lot, her dress plain but clean, her shawl tight against her shoulders as if it might hold her together. Her boots were scuffed for miles walked. Her hair was tied back, but loose strands had slipped free, brushing her cheek like stubborn reminders of where she had been. Her chin stayed up, not proud but refusing to break, though her eyes carried the long miles of hunger and the sting of being passed over. The auctioneer cleared his throat, the sound sharp and impatient. He had sold strong women earlier, cooks, widows, farmhands with good backs, and each had been taken quickly, claimed by men who needed help on land, men who wanted someone to fill the silence in their cabins. This one had been left standing too long, the crowd restless now, the bids dried up. No one spoke. A drunk near the back muttered something that made a few men laugh under their breath. She heard them. She heard everything, the shuffling boots, the creak of leather, the weight of being measured and found lacking. Her fingers tightened in the shawl. She thought of the road that had brought her here, of the farm lost in the last hard season, of the brother who had turned away when there was no more grain, no more coin, no more strength to fight for her. She had not cried then. She would not cry now. A wind came low through the street, lifting dust in a lazy spiral. Somewhere far off a coyote called. The auctioneer sighed and raised his voice. One last time. Any man here with $2 to claim this girl and give her a roof before the night takes her. Silence answered. A boot scraped. A woman passing by with her basket slowed, pity in her face. The girl's heart beat once hard, as if asking whether this was where her road ended, unsold, unchosen, sent back into the dark to find her way alone. She had thought herself done with fear, but fear was here again, sitting heavy in her chest. It was then, from the far edge of the gathering, a man shifted. Slowly, as though the motion cost him something, he pushed himself upright from where he had been leaning against the post. The lantern light found him in pieces, first the hat brim pulled low, then the shadowed line of a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in days, then the broad shoulders under a coat worn at the seams. He was not young, but not yet old. There was a weight in the way he stood, like someone used to carrying burdens no one else could see. His boots were dusted pale, his hands calloused. His eyes, when they lifted, were dark as turned earth after rain, and they settled on the girl in a way that made her pull a small breath, as if she had been seen for the first time all day. The auctioneer blinked. Well now, do we have a taker? The man didn't look at the crowd. He didn't need to. His voice came quiet but sure. I'll take her. A murmur rippled through the men, some surprised, some amused. She ain't much use, someone muttered. The man turned his head just enough that the whisper died on the wind. Coins clinked in the auctioneer's hand. The deal was struck, quick and simple. The girl felt her knees loosen, as though she had been standing for hours holding up the sky, and someone had finally taken a weight from her shoulders. The man didn't reach for her arm the way some men had with the other brides. He simply nodded toward the edge of town, then turned and began to walk. Something in that silent courtesy made her follow. The wagon waited near the livery, a plain thing, sturdy and clean. He helped her up with a quiet gesture, then climbed onto the seat beside her, setting the reins in his hands. The town slid behind them with each slow turn of the wheels. The night spread itself wide, the sky a sheet of stars spilling across the black. The road ahead was pale in the moonlight, the horses steady and patient. For a long time, neither spoke. She could feel him there beside her, solid as the earth, his presence filling the silence without pressing on it. She kept her shawl tight, though not from cold. There was a strange stillness inside her, as though something that had been trembling for weeks had finally stilled. She studied him out of the corner of her eye. His face was cut by lines that spoke of sun and sorrow. He kept his gaze forward, as though he had been driving this road for years and knew every shadow. She thought of asking where they were going, how far, what kind of work he needed her for, but something in his quiet made her wait. Words could come later. An hour passed like that, the road whispering under them. When he finally spoke, it was not a question but a statement, offered as if to keep the darkness company. "It's a good place," he said. "Not much, but it's home." She nodded, though he was not looking at her. She found her voice enough to answer soft, "That's all I ever wanted." He glanced at her then, just a flicker, but felt like a promise being weighed and measured. The wagon crested a low ridge. Below them, faint in the moonlight, spread the land, a fence line tracing the edges, a barn hunched like an old sentinel, a cabin with smoke rising from the chimney, even at this hour. It looked small against the dark sweep of prairie, but there was a steadiness to it, as though it had stood its ground against many seasons and meant to stand against many more. Her throat tightened. Something in her chest ached with a strange mix of relief and fear, as if she were about to step into the rest of her life. The horses slowed as they came into the yard. He set the brake, climbed down, and offered a hand without looking at her, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She placed her fingers in his, felt the roughness of his palm, the steadiness of his grip. The cabin door stood open, a warm glow spilling out onto the porch. He led her toward it, then stopped, giving her space to step in first. She crossed the threshold, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and clean pine. This was no grand house, but it was whole. A table with 2 chairs, a shelf with worn books, a single picture frame turned face down on the mantel, as though waiting for the right time to be lifted. He set her small bundle near the corner and spoke again, voice low, almost shy. "You can take the bed tonight. I'll keep to the chair." She wanted to thank him, but found herself unable to speak. Instead, she nodded once and turned toward the room he had indicated. When she lay down, staring at the ceiling, she could still hear him moving in the other room, quiet, measured, like a man keeping watch. The night settled around them, not lonely this time, but full of something she could not yet name. Sleep came slow, but when it came without fear. Outside, the wind moved softly through the grass, and the lantern on the porch guttered low, as though the world itself was holding its breath for what would come next. Morning came soft and silver, sliding through the small cabin window, and catching in the curls of smoke rising from the dying embers in the hearth. She woke to the sound of a rooster somewhere beyond the barn, and to the steady rhythm of a man's boots on the porch. For a moment she lay still, staring at the wooden ceiling, feeling the unfamiliar weight of a roof she did not fear might be taken from her. When she stepped into the main room, he was already there, a tin cup in his hand, steam curling from it. He glanced at her just enough to meet her eyes, then nodded toward the table where another cup waited. She crossed the room, her bare feet silent on the boards, and wrapped her fingers around the tin. "Thank you," she said quietly. He grunted softly, but there was no hardness in it. Outside, the land stretched wide and patient, fences drawing lines through the gold of the grass, the barn shadow long and sharp in the morning light. He led her through it in quiet fashion, showing her where the chickens scratched, where the well stood, where the horses waited in their stalls. Each thing he named as if introducing her to old friends, the gray gelding, the milk cow, the dog that trotted along behind them with ears twitching. By noon, she had taken to the kitchen, her hands remembering the way of bread dough, the rhythm of stirring stew. He worked outside, mending a broken hinge, the sound of his hammer like a heartbeat against the wind. They met again at the table when the sun hung low, eating in silence at first until she asked him about the picture turned face down on the mantel. He did not look up. "My wife," he said simply, and there was a pause that stretched like a slow, deep breath. "She gone." His nod was small, his jaw tightening. 2 winters now. She lowered her gaze, not with pity but with respect, as though stepping into sacred ground. "I'm sorry." He didn't answer, but she thought she saw his shoulders ease, just a little, as if the words had taken some weight from him. Days became a pattern, one folding into the next. She mended shirts, kept the cabin swept, learned which of the hens would peck and which would not. He taught her to check the fence line, to watch the sky for weather. They spoke little, yet there was a rhythm to their silences, a shared understanding that did not need words. One evening she found him sitting on the porch steps, oiling the leather of his saddle. She sat down nearby, folding her skirt beneath her. The sky above them was burning itself out in streaks of red and gold, and for a long while they just watched it fade. "You work hard," he said at last, as if the words had been sitting with him for days, waiting to be spoken. "It's the only way I know," she answered, his hand stilled on the saddle. "Most would have given up before now." She turned her head to look at him, searching his face. "Most don't know what it means to have nothing left to lose." His eyes met hers, and for the first time since that night at the auction, she felt the air between them shift. It was not romance yet, not promise, but something fragile and alive taking root in the quiet. It might have stayed gentle like that if trouble hadn't come down the road a few days later. The sound of horses carried on the wind first, too many, too fast. He stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, just as 3 men rode into the yard. Dust rose behind them like smoke, and the one in front grinned wide, as if the world belonged to him. "Well, I'll be," the man drawled, sliding from his horse. His eyes went straight to her where she stood near the porch, a bucket in her hands. "Ain't this a surprise? Thought they'd send you back east when no one wanted you." Her throat went dry. She knew that voice, knew it from the town where she had begged for a place to stay, and been turned away. He was the one who had laughed first, loudest, when the bids had failed to come. The cowboy moved then, slow and deliberate, stepping between her and the men. He did not raise his voice. "You've had your look. Now turn around." The man laughed, a sound sharp and ugly. "Don't reckon I will. She's a free woman. Maybe she ought to decide if she'd rather come with me." Her heart pounded, but she did not step forward. Not toward that man. Not toward the life that had already tried to swallow her whole. "She's under my roof," the cowboy said, his voice low, calm but carrying something cold beneath it. "That's all the deciding there is." The man sneered, spat into the dirt. "Didn't figure you for one to buy a wife. You must be worse off than I thought." The words hung in the air, mean and cutting, but they did not move him. He stood as steady as the fence posts he had driven into the ground, his hands loose at his sides. "Leave," he said. The man hesitated, the grin faltering when he saw there would be no shouting, no fight, just that unshakable stillness. He swung back into the saddle with a curse and turned his horse. The others followed, the sound of hooves fading until the yard was quiet again. Only then did she breathe, her hands shaking, so hard she nearly dropped the bucket. He turned to her, not reaching out, just looking as though he were making sure she was still whole. "You all right?" She nodded, but the tears that had refused to come for months finally brimmed. She set the bucket down, pressing her hands to her face. He stood there a moment, then stepped closer and rested a hand on her shoulder. Light, steady, nothing more. It was enough to ground her, to let her cry, without shame. When the storm of it passed, she sank down onto the porch steps, and he sat beside her. Neither spoke for a long while. The sky was dark now, the first stars beginning to prick through. "I thought I was done being afraid," she whispered. "You're not alone now," he said, and the words were so simple they might have been mistaken for plain fact, except they felt like a vow. Something in her chest loosened. For the first time she believed she might stay, not just because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had been chosen, truly chosen. The days after that felt different. She caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she wouldn't notice, a glance over his shoulder when she hung laundry, a pause when she laughed at the dog chasing its tail. She found herself leaving small things for him. Bread still warm when he came in from the field, the cabin swept before he rose in the morning. One night, near the end of summer, they sat on the porch again. The air was warm, crickets singing in the grass. "You could go if you wanted," he said quietly, staring out at the pasture. She looked at him, startled. "There's money enough now. You could take the train east, start over." Her breath caught. "Do you want me to go?" He turned then, and the look in his eyes was soft but steady. "No. I just wanted you to know you could stay because you wanted to, not because you had to." She felt the words settle deep inside her, heavier than anything she had carried, but not unwelcome. She reached for his hand, slowly, and when he didn't pull away, she let her fingers rest there. The porch was quiet except for the night sounds, the stars burning steady overhead. "I'll stay," she said. He nodded once, the corner of his mouth tilting in something close to a smile. In that stillness, something between them shifted, no longer just survival, no longer just a bargain struck in the dust of a border town. It was the start of a life they would choose, day after day, under the same sky. If this story touched your heart, ride along with us for more Wild West tales. Hit subscribe, and stay by the fire for the next one.